I wasn't speeding. I was barely even moving when you pulled in behind me.
Ma'am, I clocked you at 42 in a 30 zone. That's why I stopped you.
42? No way. I just turned off the main road.
I understand you're surprised, but I do need your license and registration.
I'm on my way to pick up my son. This is ridiculous.
I hear you. Let's get the documents first and we can talk about it.
Adopt sing zech, she shapta. M. Right outside the gates of a private magnet school in an affluent neighborhood. The line of cars dropping off children was still inching along in the drop-off lane. Evelyn Vance had just rolled down her window, given her 2 grandchildren one last hug, adjusted their backpack straps, and watched until they passed through the double-glazed doors and disappeared into the brightly lit hallway. She returned to her car, closed the door gently, took a deep breath, as was her habit before each workday, and checked her watch. She had to be in the judge's office at 9:30 for a closed-door meeting about a pretrial motion for a special-degree murder case, a case that allowed no room for error. Evelyn was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit, her hair neatly styled in a professional bun. Her silver Lexus, so clean it reflected the trees lining the street. She left the curb legally, signaled, and merged gently below the speed limit. No speeding, no crossing the line, no valid reason to be stopped. But just seconds later, the red and green lights flashed in the rearview mirror like a slap in the face to that ordinary morning. A short, urgent siren blared. Evelyn tightened her grip on the steering wheel, looking around a clean road. Parents hurrying along. A patrol car tailgating her as if they'd just spotted a dangerous criminal. She didn't panic, nor was she naively surprised. She'd lived long enough to know that some things happen for no reason. Evelyn slowly pulled over, came to a neat stop, switched on her hazard lights, and placed her hands on the steering wheel at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions. Fingers spread wide. This wasn't just a habit, it was a survival script passed down through generations in many black families. Don't reach. Don't make sudden movements. Clearly articulate your every action. She looked up in the mirror and saw the silhouette of a young officer stepping out, his gait stiff as if entering a war zone, not performing community service at the school gate. And in that very moment, Evelyn understood perfectly what was about to happen wasn't a traffic check. This was a test of power, and the man had chosen the wrong target. The officer approached quickly and decisively, his hands poised near his waist as if ready to draw his gun at any moment. Before anyone could clearly see the face of the person in the car, he shouted, "Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't move." His voice carried no greeting, no introduction of name or rank, and no explanation for the stop. Evelyn did exactly as she had been taught and had taught others, keeping her hands at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions. Her back straight, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Without turning her head abruptly, through the rearview mirror, she saw him touch the trunk of the Lexus, a tactical move intended to leave fingerprints and ensure the trunk was closed, then stop at the rear door pillar, deliberately leaning slightly behind the driver's door frame to force the person inside to look up. A disadvantageous position often used by officers trained in confrontation. This was no polite stop. This was a calculated inspection. "Lower the window," he ordered curtly. Evelyn pressed the button. The window slid down smoothly. She didn't turn, just tilted her head enough to see the insignia and name tag on his bulletproof vest, K. Miller. At the same time, she glanced quickly at the body camera on his chest, clearly seeing the green light. Good. Everything was recorded. Driver's license and vehicle registration. Miller said, his eyes scanning the car's spotless interior as if searching for something that didn't belong there. Evelyn turned slowly, her voice calm and clear. The rhythm of someone accustomed to controlling space verbally. "Officer, I will comply with your request. However, my driver's license is in my handbag on the passenger seat, and my vehicle registration is in the glove compartment. I'll reach for them now. Is that all right?" In that brief moment, the atmosphere between them thickened. Evelyn felt Miller's scrutinizing gaze fixed on her every slightest movement, as if he were waiting for a slip-up, a reason to escalate the situation further than necessary. While she understood that her composure was not merely politeness, but the only shield preventing a morning of taking the children to school from turning into an irreparable disaster, Miller didn't answer her question. He smirked, leaning slightly lower to look directly into the car. His voice low but tense. "Get your papers. Don't waste time." Evelyn didn't react to the tone. She only nodded slightly, speaking slowly, each word distinct, as if reading from a recording. "I'm not wasting time. Officer, I'm informing you of my movements to ensure the safety of both parties." She reached for her bag, deliberately moving it in a straight line, unhurried, without unnecessary motion. She felt Miller's gaze follow her fingertips, felt the tension radiating from his body like an overcompressed spring. When Evelyn retrieved her driver's license and gently placed it on the steering wheel, Miller immediately reached out and snatched it, his fingers brushing against the back of her hand. He glanced at the plastic card, then looked directly into her calm face, as if comparing two mismatched things. "Is this your car?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "Yes," Evelyn replied curtly. "The registration here confirms it." Miller glanced quickly at the registration, but clearly he wasn't reading the information. His gaze returned to the car's interior, lingering longer than necessary on the dashboard, the leather seats, the neatly arranged briefcase in the back, as if everything was telling a story he didn't want to believe. "Nice car," Miller said, his voice icy. "What do you do for a living to drive a car like this?" The question, echoing in the quiet morning, sounded like an invisible punch. It had nothing to do with traffic, nothing to do with safety, and certainly nothing to do with any legitimate reason to stop the car. It was a bait. Evelyn looked straight at him, her gaze still calm but hardening. Her voice lowered slightly, becoming sharper, carrying the authority of someone familiar with the courtroom. "Officer, my profession has nothing to do with this stop. You asked for my papers, and I provided them. But to this day, you still haven't told me why I'm being stopped." The atmosphere froze for a split second. Miller straightened, his jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially by a black woman in an expensive car outside a school. And in that very moment, when his authority was reflected back by her calm and understanding, the situation at the stop began to spiral into a far more dangerous direction. Miller took a deep breath, stepped back half a pace as if to regain his composure, then spoke in a firm voice, deliberately loud enough for passing parents to hear. "I stopped you because you left the curb aggressively in schoolyard. Unsafe start. Dangerous behavior." The accusation was concise, vague, but sufficient, the kind of subjective accusation many had heard before, and few were calm enough to refute. Evelyn nearly laughed, but she restrained herself, not out of fear, but because she understood that laughing now would only make things worse. She tilted her head slightly, her voice even neither high nor low. "Officer, this car has a speed, acceleration, and braking tracking system. I entered the lane at less than 15 miles per hour. The limit here is 25. Miller paused briefly. For a split second, she saw a flicker of confusion across his face. as if he had just realized he had chosen the wrong person to make a convenient lie to. But instead of stopping, Miller took a step forward, his challenged ego making his voice sharper. "Don't teach me how to do it. I'm just recording what I'm seeing." The statement wasn't meant to prove a fact. It was meant to assert his authority. Evelyn looked him straight in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not teaching you," she replied. "I'm just stating the facts." The air thickened, tense as a taut string about to snap. The cars behind them began to slow down. A few curious glances cast over. Miller realized he was being watched, and for those accustomed to controlling through fear, being witnessed was a threat. He leaned forward, his voice low but menacing. "Get out of the car." The command was cold, without explanation, without any safety justifications. This wasn't just about traffic. This was a battle of egos, where one needed to prove right at all costs. Evelyn sat still for another moment, her hands still on the steering wheel, her heart beating steadily but her mind frighteningly clear. She understood perfectly well from this moment on. Every action, every word would not only determine her fate that morning, but also the future of the man standing in front of the car. Even though he himself had yet to realize it, the order hung suspended in the morning air, heavy and stark. Evelyn didn't immediately comply, not out of defiance, but because she was weighing every possible outcome. She'd seen too many dashcam videos, read too many reports to know that the most dangerous moment of a stop wasn't being pulled over. But when authority was challenged and the person in power decided to win at all costs, she looked up at Miller, her voice still perfectly calm. "Officer, I'm seated, seatbelt fastened, hands clearly on the steering wheel. There's no safety threat that would require me to leave the vehicle." It was a legally correct statement, neither provocative nor challenging. But to Miller, it felt like an insult. He moved closer, their distance reduced to a hand's breadth, his voice low and menacing. "I'm not asking. I'm ordering." His hand slid closer to the holster. A small gesture, but enough to convey a clear message. Evelyn felt her heart rate increase slightly. Not from panic, but from heightened alertness. She glanced quickly in the rearview mirror, seeing a minivan stopped, the woman inside staring intently, a phone peeking out of her hand, a witness, a camera, a fragile but necessary layer of protection. Evelyn took a deep breath, then spoke clearly, word by word, directly into the body camera on Miller's chest. "I will leave the vehicle as ordered. I am doing this under duress and out of fear for my safety. I do not consent to this search or detention." She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the car door, and placed one foot on the asphalt, still warm from the early morning sun. As Evelyn stood upright, shorter than Miller but not in stature, she adjusted her blazer, holding her head high, not like someone being arrested, but like someone entering a courtroom. And it was at that very moment, when a woman of color stood before the school gates, calm and dignified, facing an officer trembling with threatened pride, that this traffic stop crossed the final line, sliding straight into a land of no return for anyone. Evelyn had barely stepped out of the car when Miller's tone changed, becoming sharper and louder, as if to regain control before the eyes that were beginning to turn toward them. "Turn around. Put your hands on the roof." She didn't answer, only obeyed, slowly turning and placing her well-groomed hands on the still warm metal of the Lexus. The pavement vibrated slightly as a truck passed, drawing a few glancing heads. "Spread your legs," Miller commanded, then kicked her ankle with the tip of his boot to force her to stand wider. The action was rough and completely unnecessary. "This is unnecessary," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. Not high, but firm. "I'm standing still. I have no weapon. I decide what is necessary." Miller growled, then began to search her. His hands moved roughly along the side of her blazer, pressing against it, more as a punishment than a safety procedure. This was an unfounded frisk, a blatant breach of professional conduct. Evelyn tilted her head, her voice escaping through clenched teeth, but clear enough for the camera to capture. "You have no reasonable suspicion that I am armed or dangerous. You are conducting an illegal search." Miller paused for a brief moment. Words like reasonable suspicion or illegal search weren't what he usually heard from people being pulled over. He scoffed, trying to hide his unease. "Are you a lawyer or something?" Evelyn didn't move. "I'm the state prosecutor," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "And I prosecute officers who break the law." The words fell like an invisible hammer blow. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Miller stood still, then immediately clenched his jaw, his wounded pride leading him to choose the worst path. Instead of stopping, he decided to move forward. Because for those who have gone too far, retreating means admitting their mistake, and Miller wasn't ready to face that. Miller froze for a single breath, then let out a short, dry laugh. A laugh devoid of humor but purely defensive. "Is that so?" he said, his voice sarcastic but tinged with a subtle unease. "And I'm the police chief." Evelyn remained still, her hands on the hood of the car, her back straight. She didn't need to turn to know the words came from fear, not confidence. "If you think I'm lying," she replied, her voice even and low. "You can check my wallet. My official ID is right behind my driver's license." Miller snorted, but his hand reached for the leather wallet she had placed on the hood as instructed. He opened it, flipped through a few bank cards, some photos of smiling children, and stopped at a stiff, folded piece of leather. As he unfolded it, all movement seemed to slow. The gold-plated state attorney's office badge was clearly visible, alongside an ID card with a photo, name, and an unforgeable, reflective security seal. Evelyn J. Vance, Chief Assistant State Prosecutor. Miller stared at it, then looked up at the back of her head, then back down at the badge, as if his brain was refusing to process the information. A burning panic began to rise in his chest. But for those accustomed to using power to mask weakness, panic often turns into aggression. "Fake," Miller blurted out, snapping his purse shut. "Do you think I'm stupid, buying this online and then using it to threaten me?" Evelyn closed her eyes for a very brief moment, not out of despair, but because she clearly realized the man behind her had just crossed the final line. "Officer Miller," she said, each word clear, echoing directly into the body camera. "That's state-issued paperwork. If you continue this, there's no turning back." But Miller was no longer listening. At that moment, only one thought occupied his mind. If he stopped, he would lose. And with his ego cornered, defeat was unacceptable. Miller growled, his hand suddenly tightening around Evelyn's left wrist and pulling her forcefully behind her back. "You're under arrest," he yelled, as if shouting louder would make the lie seem real. "For impersonation and obstruction of justice." "For what reason?" Evelyn asked immediately, her voice unwavering, her body tensing to maintain her balance. "I didn't resist." "Shut up," Miller snarled, twisting her arm higher than necessary, the pain shooting up her shoulder. A minivan behind them screeched to a halt. its door swinging open. A woman stepped out, her phone held aloft. "Hey, stop, that's Mrs. Vance," her voice rang out. Panicked but clear, Miller spun around, his anger flaring. "Get back in your car, get out of the way." Evelyn seized the moment. Her voice directed straight at the body camera. "I didn't resist. I'm being held without cause. I demand you stop." Before she could finish her sentence, a metallic clang echoed. Handcuffs snapped around her wrists. Cold and painfully tight, the click resounded in the quiet morning. Like an unerasable exclamation point, Miller pushed her around, pressing her against the car door. "Stay still," he said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His voice no longer as steady as before. The woman filming stood frozen, her hands trembling, but her camera still pointed directly at them. "She's the prosecutor," she said loudly. As a final warning, Miller didn't respond. He simply pulled Evelyn toward the patrol car, each step a step deeper into his own mistake. On the sidewalk in front of the school gate, amidst stunned stares and recording phones, Evelyn Vance was led away in handcuffs not because she had broken the law, but because a man had decided that admitting guilt was more terrifying than destroying his career. Miller Mercua, so Tuan Tra. Đẩy Evelyn cúi người chui vào khoang ghế nhựa cứng lạnh lẽo phía sau, nơi mùi chất khử trùng nồng lên trộn lẫn với mùi cũ kỹ khó chịu. Cánh cửa đóng sầm lại. Tiếng kim loại vang lên khô khốc, tách bà khỏi con đường quen thuộc và những ánh mắt chứng kiến bên ngoài. Evelyn ngồi thẳng lưng, điều chỉnh tư thế để giảm áp lực lên cổ tay đang bị siết chặt phía sau. Cảm giác tê dại bắt đầu lan xuống các ngón tay. Bà không hoảng loạn. Thay vào đó, bà làm điều mình đã làm hàng chục năm trong các vụ án lớn ghi nhớ. 9 giờ 2 phút sáng. Bị còng tay không có căn cứ. Dùng lực quá mức. Nhân chứng bị đe dọa. Mỗi chi tiết được xếp gọn gàng trong đầu như từng mục trong bản cáo trạng. Qua tấm lưới kim loại ngăn khoang, bà thấy Miller quay lại chiếc Lexus. Anh ta không gọi xe kéo. Anh ta mở cửa, cúi vào trong, lục hộp đựng đồ, rồi nhấc chiếc cặp tài liệu lên. Evelyn cảm thấy một cơn lạnh chạy dọc sống lưng. Trong đó là hồ sơ đại bồi thẩm, tài liệu vụ án đang thụ lý, những thứ được pháp luật bảo vệ nghiêm ngặt. Sequan Miller. Bà nói lớn từ ghế sau. Giọng vang qua khoang xe. Trong xe, tôi có tài liệu mật của bạn. Anh không có thẩm quyền xem hay động vào chúng. Miller không trả lời. And, Tamercap. Lật từng tập giấy với vẻ bực bội, như đang tìm thứ gì đó để cứu vãn tình thế ma túy. Vũ khí. Bất cứ thứ gì có thể biện minh cho việc anh ta vừa làm. Chỉ có giấy tờ pháp lý, lệnh tòa và một cuốn kinh thánh mỏng. Không có gì cả. Anh ta ném chiếc cặp trở lại ghế, đóng cửa xe mạnh tay, rồi quay về xe tuần tra. Gương mặt căng cứng khi động cơ nổ máy và chiếc xe bắt đầu lăn bánh. Evelyn cất giọng lần nữa. Bình tĩnh nhưng ráng rỏi, anh đang phạm thêm sai lầm. Và mỗi dặm anh lái đi lúc này chỉ khiến hậu quả nặng hơn. Miller Butt Radio. Tiếng bộ đàm rè át đi lời bà. Nhưng dù anh ta có cố không nghe, sự thật vẫn đang bám theo từng vòng quay của bánh xe. Và Evelyn biết rõ con đường họ đang đi, không dẫn bà đến rắc rối, mà dẫn anh ta thẳng tới đó. The patrol car sped faster than necessary, turning into the familiar compound of the county police headquarters, a place Evelyn had walked through countless times as a legal partner, never as the arrested. As the car pulled into the sally port, the heavy metal doors slowly rolled down the back, slamming shut and trapping them in a solid block of concrete echoing with the engine's roar. Miller stepped out first, opened the back door, and gave a curt order, "Get out." His voice was different now. No longer sharp as before, but thin and urgent. Evelyn stepped out, her legs stiff from the handcuffs, but her posture remained upright. "These handcuffs are too tight," she said, her voice even. "I'm losing feeling in my left fingers." "Procedure," Miller muttered, avoiding her gaze. He took her arm, this time with noticeably less force, and led her to the processing area. The familiar smell of cold coffee, floor cleaner, and sweat filled Evelyn's nostrils, a smell she'd encountered countless times on duty, only never from behind bars. They stopped at the reception desk. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged man, graying-haired, in neat uniform, typing on a computer and sipping coffee from a foam cup. "What is it?" "Miller," he asked, without looking up. Miller set the papers down, trying to keep his voice calm. "A suspect, impersonating an officer, obstructing the investigation." The man stopped, looked up, and the whole space seemed to freeze. His eyes widened, the coffee cup suspended in midair. He jumped to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "Miller," he murmured, his voice incredulous. "What the hell are you doing?" Evelyn tilted her head, looking directly at him. "Hello, Sergeant Kowalski," she said calmly. "I believe your officer has made a grave mistake." The color drained from Miller's face. In that moment, he realized he wasn't dealing with a situation, but had become the situation itself. No further explanation was needed. The mere mention of Evelyn Vance's name was enough to change the atmosphere in the room. Sergeant Kowalski strode quickly from behind the counter, scrutinizing her face before turning sharply to Miller. His voice low but sharp as a knife. "Remove the handcuffs." "Now." Miller froze, his lips moving as if trying to say something to save himself. But no words came out. "Did you hear me?" Kowalski roared, snatching the bunch of keys from Miller's hand. As he inserted the key into the lock, Evelyn spoke, her voice low, but each word heavy. "I demand the immediate sealing of all body cameras, dash cams, and dispatch logs related to this stop. I also demand that Officer Miller not leave the room, not access the computer or the phone." "Understood, ma'am," Kowalski replied without hesitation. He unlocked the handcuffs, the metal snapping from Evelyn's wrists, revealing deep red marks that were beginning to turn purple. Miller recoiled, his back against the wall, his face as white as if all the blood had been drained from it. The internal bell rang. Kowalski held the walkie-talkie, his voice stern. "Captain, request immediate access to the reception area. Red code." Minutes later, the previously quiet hallway became unusually bustling. Officers huddled together, whispering as they saw Evelyn standing there, rubbing her wrist, while Miller cowered in a corner. Captain Reynolds appeared at the door, his imposing figure stiffening at the sight before him. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if praying it were just a nightmare. "Mrs. Vance," he said quickly, stepping forward. "Please tell me this isn't what I think." Evelyn lifted her head, her gaze cold and decisive. "Not angry. It is exactly as you think. I was pulled over, ordered out of the car without justification, searched, and arrested illegally. And everything has been recorded." Reynolds turned to Miller, his face shifting from bewilderment to pure rage. "Miller," he snarled, "hand over the badge and the gun. Now." Miller, trembling, unfastened the gun, placed the Glock on the table, and removed the badge from his chest. without the badge, without the weapon. He looked like a young man who had destroyed his future in less than an hour. Captain Reynolds pointed toward the hallway leading to the internal conference room. "You sit there. Don't speak to anyone. Don't make calls. Don't leave your seat," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Miller walked away, head bowed, shoulders slumped, each step heavier as he realized he had reached the end of his career as a police officer. Evelyn was ushered into the captain's office. She sat down in a leather chair and requested a single call. When the district attorney answered and heard, "I'm at the police station, and I've just been arrested," the entire system went into crisis mode. Less than 20 minutes later, the police department and prosecutor's office leaders were present. Body cam footage was played. Dash cams were pulled up. And when the audio of Miller muttering, probably due to racial bias, maybe carjacking, echoed through the conference room, no one tried to offer an excuse anymore. Everything was clear. Miller was suspended immediately, then fired, then permanently stripped of his license. Over 20 of his old cases were reviewed, and many convictions were overturned. The city had to pay millions of dollars in compensation. Evelyn, however, didn't celebrate or seek revenge. She demanded reform, retraining, and stricter supervision. A year later, on the same road in front of the school, Evelyn drove past and saw another car stop. This time, the officer approached slowly, greeted her, explained clearly, his hand never on his gun. Evelyn smiled faintly and drove on. The system wasn't perfect, but at least here, it had changed because of one person who dared to stand firm. And the question that remains, for all of us, hangs in the balance. If this happens to a powerful prosecutor, what about those without titles? Without legal knowledge, justice shouldn't be a privilege. It should be the default.